Hi, and welcome to this presentation. My name's Matthew Richards. I'm Head of Mobility and Security for Third Space, and I'd like to spend some time with you to talk to you about ways that you can justify your identity and security investments. So I'd like to cover a number of topics. First of all, I'd like to talk about the security challenges. These are, in essence, what fueled the birth of this service that I'm about to tell you about. Some of them hopefully will be, if not all of them, will resonate with you. Then I'll move into the security and privacy service itself and give you an insight into the components that comprise that service. And then we'll talk and spend a little bit more time on the visual aspects of the service. So how can we visualize your security posture? And then briefly at the end we'll talk about the outcomes that you can expect to get from adopting this service. So if we now focus on the security challenges, as I've already mentioned, I think a lot of these will no doubt resonate with the majority of you. In essence, they fall into four key categories. So we look at data security, mitigation of risk, visibility and value, and then the preserving the end user experience. So from a data security perspective, we're looking at how we protect data both on premises, in the cloud, and importantly in transit. Those are particular challenges to a number of customers that we work with. You'll no doubt experience challenges around being able to identify who's actually accessing your data, and importantly, certainly for those unmanaged devices, how can we prevent any form of data footprint from landing on those devices, but still enabling the user to be able to use those devices. From a risk mitigation perspective, it's absolutely critical to be able to be aware and B, respond effectively to any potential activities by malicious users within your organization. So this, I'm referring to what we call a pre-breach and a post-breach scenario. So it's incredibly important to be able to protect at the front door any particular malicious activities or attempts, but really importantly, it's important to, I guess, adopt a breach mentality. So that's making sure you've got the relevant tools and processes in place within your organization to be able to detect that malicious activity, and this may not be this may not be an external user trying to gain access. This could well be an insider as well, a malicious insider. So being able to detect those and respond effectively is an absolutely critical capability. Compliance is top of the list for most organisations. Not to mention the GDPR, which we're all subject to, and also within the UK, specifically the Data Protection Act of 2018. So being able to demonstrate compliance against those relevant compliance regimes is absolutely critical. Being able to understand how secure your organisation is, I'd say, is pretty important. But how do you do that? There are so many different moving parts, and importantly, how do we visualise that? How can you present that back to senior management and demonstrate to them your posture, in effect, with regards to security and privacy? How can you demonstrate a return on your security investment? So you've managed to secure some significant budget, you've implemented a lot of the technologies. What is it that you then demonstrate or play back to the business, again to the senior business decision makers within your organisation? How can you demonstrate to them that money has gone into an area that has demonstrated an improvement in posture, in essence, against security and privacy? And something that we see time and time again with almost all customers is wanting, or the need and desire to maximize their existing Microsoft 365 investment. So Microsoft 365 obviously is the sort of top level cloud plan or SKU, if you like, from Microsoft, and there are lots and lots of moving parts in there. Even if we just look at the security capabilities and compliance capabilities within that suite of technologies, there are a plethora of different things, lots of moving parts. So making sure that you're taking advantage of those elements that you've already invested in, and taking advantage of them in the most efficient manner. So making sure that things are integrated and that different security components operate together. making sure that you have the ability to maybe demonstrate the need for some more advanced security controls, things that may exist in an E5 workload. That is something that's of particular challenge as well when we work with customers. So understanding what the benefit is to your organization, and then being able to put that into some form of business case in order to justify additional security spend. And of course, across all of these challenges, and we've only touched on a number of them here, there are a wide range of challenges, as no doubt you'll appreciate. But balancing all of these challenges and addressing all of them whilst preserving the end user experience is absolutely critical, because you want your users to be productive, you want them to be able to use the devices that they enjoy using at the different locations that they work within, but being able to do so in a secure and predictable manner is absolutely critical. So not enabling too many security controls, or at least those controls that may have a large or an impactful experience to the end user, is balancing that security and end user experience, absolutely critical. So based on these challenges that we see continually and have done for many, many years with all the customers that we engage with, we looked at different ways of actually trying to simplify a lot of those challenges and address those challenges in a consistent and repeatable way. So as I said, those really were the catalyst, I guess. Those challenges were the catalyst to us developing our security and privacy service. And this is what I'd like to talk to you about now. So our service in essence comprises three core components. So initially we start with something called our current state assessment, or CSA. And this really is a mechanism, this is the starting point really, a mechanism for us to be able to benchmark your organization from a security and privacy perspective. So we measure a number of different pillars within our service, and we'll talk about exactly what those pillars are shortly. But in essence, the CSA is something that will benchmark your organization and give you a view of your posture against security and privacy, against those 6 key pillars. So the way that we implement or deliver this assessment is in essence through 2 different mechanisms. So first of all, we conduct a workshop with a number of representatives from your organization, ranging from the CISO through to IT manager, through to architect level, and indeed people have a focus on compliance and data protection, so a DPO would be an ideal person. But in essence, we spend around 2 to 3 hours digging into various aspects relating to the technical controls that you may have in place to protect you in different scenarios, through to things like your governance policies and processes in order to make those technical controls work and operate in an effective manner. So there's the workshop component that I've just briefly described, and then in parallel to that activity we conduct a number of programmatic assessments. So these assessments range or cover a wide range of different aspects of your environment. So firstly, we look at your tenant, your Office 365 tenant, and consume the information that SecureScore provides to make sure that we understand what controls you have in place, what ones you should have in place, and consume that information and process it in an easily digestible manner, which I'll come on to in a second. Then we look at the cloud applications that you use within your organization. So this is a particular challenge and has been for a number of years. So this in essence is getting visibility on all the different cloud apps, the cloud services that your organization uses. So we can do this in a number of different ways. We can consume logs from your network perimeter devices, process those, and then being able to detail those cloud apps that you use. We also append or complement that list with an assessment based on their security posture as well. So is this cloud app particularly secure or insecure? Have they had a breach recently, or et cetera, et cetera. Lots of different information that will help you understand the risks involved in essence with consuming or continuing use of that cloud application. Then thirdly, what we do is look at your vulnerability to being subject to a rapid cyber attack. So these are ones that no doubt you've seen in the press time and time again. These are types of malware that can proliferate very, very rapidly within your organization and cause significant impact to your business function. So we saw this with the NHS with the WannaCry encryption malware. So the assessment itself will perform a programmatic assessment against a number of your endpoints within your organization. So we'll install a bit of software, we'll let that operate for a period of a number of hours typically. And that will go off and assess your vulnerability or susceptibility, if you like, to being subject to one of those attacks. So we look at the different ports, the different firewalls that you have enabled on your endpoints and different protocols that might be enabled. And then lastly, we look at your local Active Directory database. So this is where we can give you some visibility on the risk involved or the vulnerability involved with the identities that exist within your local Active Directory. So we do some comparisons of NTLM hashes based in your Active Directory, and we compare those hashes with ones that are freely available on the internet. So in essence, trying to give you an indication of accounts that may be easily compromised. So all of those information sources, so the workshop and the 4 assessments that we conduct, we gather that information and we process the results. And the results then are presented to you in 2 forms. Firstly, we provide a detailed assessment report that will be adequate for consumption by a number of different personas. So initially your senior business decision makers or C-level personnel, people who just want to see the risk exposure and the high level points of the assessment. So what are the most vulnerable areas within the organization, and importantly, how do we mitigate the risk that those particular components pose? So it'll address and communicate to those types of people, and importantly, the bulk of the report then has some very detailed information that will be useful to the IT professional, IT manager, in being able to understand the rationale behind the recommendations that we've put forward. So in essence, there'll be a series of recommendations that we categorize into critical, moderate and important based on security and privacy. And importantly then, we give you a roadmap that you can understand in which to improve your posture in those areas. So we've marked you, or we've assessed you in one way, and then we give you the mechanism or the map, if you like, in order to improve that security posture. There are lots more information that we provide in the assessment report, things like current trends from a cybersecurity perspective to make you aware of what is posing the most risk at the moment. But it's a comprehensive document, as I said, that will give you the starting point to understand how to improve your posture with regards to security and privacy. And then secondly, what we do is to visualize or provide a mechanism that allows us to visualize your security posture. And we'll spend a little bit of time going through some examples of that later on during the presentation, so I won't speak too much about this at this point. But suffice to say, it's quite an effective mechanism in order to, at a glance, see your posture. So this is something that I believe your senior business decision makers or C-level people would be able to understand quickly and get a view of progress. So once we have all of that information about your environment and the areas that we have recommended that you improve or you apply different controls or different approaches to, ultimately to improve your posture, what we do is take that and then we provide an architect-led strategic and planning enablement capability. So as I say, we assign an architect to you as the customer, and that architect takes the many different aspects that have been highlighted in that report support and look to work with you to develop a detailed roadmap, including things like implementation plans, and get you to understand the cost involved in the implementation and indeed the effort involved. So that will result in, the overall architecture or strategy to improve your posture, but no doubt will involve multiple different work streams in order to improve that posture. Provided across all of the aspects of this service is our comprehensive customer-ready support. So this is something that we provide that will provide you with the ability to, have the confidence of raising an incident with us that we can then work with you to fix whatever that particular issue is. But importantly, the support services also include a number of recurring activities. So these are monthly, quarterly, bi-monthly activities, and in general they're there to provide insight into the overall service, so it could give you some metrics around how we're performing and what sort of issues that we're seeing within your organization, and importantly it's a mechanism for us to be able to inform you of any developments from a security and privacy posture, both in the wider security landscape, but importantly from a Microsoft perspective. So what new developments have happened over the last 3 months? What new features, what new capabilities are available on the platform that you've already invested in? And how can those be consumed and adopted by yourselves in the most efficient manner? So this is sort of a continual engagement activity. Security is not something that you just tick the box with, perform some activities and then step away. It very much is something that evolves and changes on a regular basis. So we work closely with you to make sure that you're aware of those changes and those particular risks, and also those capabilities, features and components that might be available to you as a result of development from Microsoft. So we make sure that you can take advantage of all of those aspects. So I've mentioned, we assess you against a number of pillars. So these actually are the pillars that we assess you against. There are 6 of them. So from identity and access management perspective, obviously, as the name suggests, we'd focus in on this area and look at things like, how are you protecting your identities? How are you managing access into the various resources and services that you provide to your users? And are you doing that in a secure way? Do you have the relevant controls? Not just technical controls, but also the policies and processes as well to support those technical controls. From an information protection perspective, obviously this revolves around protecting ultimately your intellectual property or your data and making sure it doesn't get into the wrong hands. So we look at all sorts of things here around protecting on-premises data, cloud data, data that's in transit, and also things like, making sure that you have things like tamper-resistant backups. In the event of a catastrophic event, do you have the mechanism to recover from that, and making sure that you're clear on what that mechanism is and how long it will take to actually get you back up to speed. A wide range of things that we cover there. From a threat protection perspective, again, this covers all sorts of different aspects of your environment, but this, in essence, will look at something I've already mentioned or touched on briefly, which is your pre-breach and post-breach capability. So what mechanisms do you have in place to protect you at the front door? So things like, do you have relevant spear phishing or phishing attack protection? Do you have malware protection? Are you monitoring your internal environment for malicious activities? And it's not just as simple as it may have been a few years back or a number of years back. We need to use quite sophisticated technology to understand what is malicious and what isn't malicious. Things have changed significantly from an attack technique perspective. But threat protection, suffice to say, will cover a wide range of areas. Predominantly, I think, focused on endpoints and devices that you may use within your organization. From a security management perspective, then, what management capabilities do you have within your environment to manage things like endpoints and servers and devices? How are you managing those? Do you have the right capability? Are you able to, do things like selective wipe or a device wipe in the event of a device getting lost or stolen? All of those different aspects. And are you able to manage effectively and efficiently the various patches and software updates that Microsoft release, not only on a Patch Tuesday, but also things like the various builds that Microsoft release twice a year. So do you have the right mechanism in place to be able to manage and adopt those changes, importantly, because these changes are very important to embrace, because they cover a wide range of security updates that ultimately serve to protect you from these malicious activities. Then we have the awareness pillar. This we tackle in two different ways, or two different areas really. It's an awareness from an end user perspective. So are your users aware of good practice on the internet? Are they aware of their obligations and what to do from a GDPR perspective or a DPA 2018 perspective? Do they understand things like what confidential information is for your organization, or indeed what sensitive information is? And do they know how to act accordingly? And the other side of awareness is making sure that your IT professional or IT department, in essence, is up to date with not only the latest technologies, because these evolve on a regular basis, almost on a monthly basis. Microsoft release new features and capabilities, which is fantastic, but it also poses quite a significant challenge to keep on top of. So this is where we'll make sure that you are up to date with those developments so that you can take advantage of them effectively within your organization. And then from a governance perspective, this looks at governance across the board. So, what compliance regimes do you need to adhere to, and helping you understand your posture in regard to those, as well as, general good practice IT governance policies and processes as well. So making sure you have the good groundwork, because I think it's important to state that you may have all the technical controls under the sun, but really without the proper governance of those and the policies and processes that support them, they're really not doing what they can do for you. So governance is an incredibly important aspect of your operational activities, as well as the assessment as well. So I mentioned a few slides back around the two deliverables, if you like, from our CSA, our current state assessment, and that's where we do the baselining of your posture. I talked about the detailed report that we provide, and also alluded to a visual dashboard. So that's what I'd like to do now, is to take you through a few of the aspects in that dashboard and give you insight into the value that we believe it presents. So this is in essence the top level of the dashboard. We can see it caters for the 6 pillars that I've already mentioned, and hopefully you can see very clearly that it aims to draw your attention to those areas that are requiring the most attention. So we use a red, amber, green color coding here. So obviously the red areas are ones that will require the most attention, the ones that we've determined that have the least amount of capability, let's say. And indeed we have amber and we have the green aspects there, and a number of other elements at the bottom. So let me take you through some of the other areas of this dashboard. So if we look at the identity and access management pillar, we can get a view here, and we can see that, okay, we've got 9% as a score here, not great, and hence that's why it's indicated as red. We've got some other information that it's surfacing here around the high priority recommendations. So how do you get more information about that? What are these high priority recommendations? So what we do, if you can notice an arrow that's there in the bottom right hand corner of the identity and access management pillar, if you were to click on that, that would then take you down to the next level, where we try and provide some rationale as to why we've scored you the way that we have. So in essence, this page comprises a number of areas, but the key one here are the recommendations. So these are the things that you will need to address in order to improve your posture. What you're seeing here is just a list of a number of the high priority recommendations. Obviously, if there were medium or low priority ones there as well, we'd show those, and that particular box is something that you can scroll up and down with. But something that we keep getting asked is around, well, what if if we look at one example there, so MFA or multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, all means the same thing. This is an incredibly effective and important aspect of anybody's security strategy. This is around protecting your identities. So what about if we wanted to implement MFA? What if we address that recommendation? What improvement would I expect to get from that? How would that impact my overall posture? So if I can draw your attention to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here, where we've got the projected improvements button, if we were to click on that, then that would take us through to a different screen that will enable us to understand the impact of addressing a number of those recommendations. So, for instance, we've talked about MFA, or I've referenced MFA already. If we were to implement MFA, all we do within the dashboard is click on that particular item, as I've done there, and immediately we can see then that that's going to affect a 7% increase in your score. So you can then go and click on different aspects or the different recommendations, and get an understanding of where you might see the biggest impact if you were to adopt some of those recommendations. And similarly, you can do that across the board, across the 6 key pillars that we've got there. So going back to the previous screen, something that we find that's incredibly informative, and a lot of customers like to get this sort of visibility, is ultimately their exposure from a risk perspective. This is what it's all about, really, from a security and privacy. It's what is my risk exposure? So we aim to capture that as part of the assessment. So what you can see on the screen now is an interpretation of our assessment based on 9 key risk categories. We also have another visualization to the right here, which I'll come to in a second. But if we focus our attention on the risk exposure here, we can clearly see that compliance and account breach and maybe data exfiltration are those risk areas that this particular organization, Contoso, is most at risk from. So those are the areas that we really need to focus on. And moving to the right-hand side here, to the category diagram or visualization, what we can see here is that the majority of the recommendations are actually focused around technical controls, so technology that we can deploy in order to mitigate the risk in those areas, whether it be compliance, account breach, data exfiltration, or the others that are indicated as well. And there is also, that there are also some processes that we would need to, or that we would recommend in order for you to get effective improvement, if you like, against those risk exposures. So, if you can see at the top part of the screen here, we've got a number of, well, in fact, we've got the representation of the 6 key pillars, and currently we're looking at identity and access management. You're able to click on those different key pillars to get your risk exposure, very easily. So understand, from an awareness, governance, information protection, etc., what is my risk exposure? This we find is incredibly useful information, certainly from a senior business decision maker or a C-level personnel. They're very, very keen, and importantly to them is understanding the risk exposure of the organization. So if we come back to the top level screen here, I alluded to at the beginning a number of different areas at the bottom of the screen here, one of which I'd like to look at in a moment, which is the Shadow IT assessment. All of these are clickable, obviously, and will have data behind them and visualizations. But if we look at the Shadow IT assessment, so in this page, we can see a breakdown of your Shadow IT assessment, in essence telling you what cloud applications are in use within your organization. We give you some information around the amount of data that they consume, but importantly, we also give you an assessment based on the security or the risk aspect of that application. So we can see here that we've got one high-risk app. And if we were to click on the relevant parts of the dashboard, that would expose that specific application. So additional information is contained within the assessment report that will dive into the rationale behind why this is risky. What is it about this app that's risky? Maybe it's using an out-of-date or an SSL 1.0 certificate. There are a number of different metrics, but we expose that within the assessment report. So, overall, this gives you, the high level or the top level screen of the dashboard gives you, really good visibility. It's very useful to those senior business decision makers who just want to, at a glance, get a view of what their posture is across those 6 key pillars. And importantly, it's something that can also demonstrate a return on, security investment specifically. So look at what the assessment was, the first time. The second time it's run, hopefully we'll see an improvement in that. So I've also mentioned at the beginning the second deliverable of the current state assessment, which is the assessment report. This report is a detailed report aimed at 2 key personnel, or persona rather, within the business, so senior business decision maker, the C-level type people who want to see a summary really of what their company or what their company is exposed to from a risk perspective, and importantly what it's going to take to mitigate that risk. So we provide that sort of summary information, and the bulk of the report is very much focused around giving you the necessary information and tools to be able to mitigate the risk that we've identified in the across the 6 key pillars. So it'll be a collection of recommendations, in essence, categorized in critical, moderate, and important, and also prioritized based on your specific security and privacy priorities as well, which obviously will take into account things like budget, resource constraint, and your own specific priorities. So the list itself will be prioritized accordingly, and also it will contain a roadmap so that you can understand, well, where should you start, what's the next step, and the next step after that. What we would do typically with this information then is to, this would lead into that sort of strategic enablement phase that I showed you at the beginning, the second portion of the security and privacy service, where we then dig deeper into defining and designing a strategy, in essence, to improve your posture. Again, sticking on the report has many aspects to it. I've just tried to pull out certain snippets of the report to give you an indication. We cover a wide range of topics. We try and be graphical as possible. We've got lots of diagrams in there, which obviously speak 1,000 words. But also importantly, with regards to the recommendations, what we do is give you an indication from an adoption or an implementation perspective. How complex is this technology? Does it have an impact to the business and the end user? What is the complexity overall, and give you some information really to be able to help structure or define the next steps for your organization. So typically you may want to tackle those that are very easy to implement, that have no user impact but provide significant improvement in security and privacy, and then look to plan those that have a more impactful nature. And indeed, one thing to mention at this point is that the technology itself is relatively straightforward. We really have a good understanding of the technology and confident that we can come and deploy and enable the technology in a short space of time. The big challenge with anything really with regards to security and any new service or system, in essence, that you introduce into your organization is getting that business adoption, making sure that you've cleared the path, you've got the necessary stakeholders involved, you're embracing the users. So something that we can offer as part of the service as well is something that we call our technology adoption services, to make sure that the technology is adopted efficiently and effectively within your business. This is something that we're seeing some huge success with a number of different organizations. So very briefly now to wrap it all up, the outcomes that I think you would expect from adopting our security and privacy service, obviously the key thing here is getting visibility of your security and privacy posture. It's really a valuable tool, not only for IT staff and technical people to get a quick glance of where we are with regards to those 6 key pillars, but also a mechanism that's highly effective for senior business decision decision makers as well. We implement a roadmap, so the outcome of this is a roadmap that gives you visibility of what that journey is, if you like, to improve your posture where we've identified significant risk. It's a mechanism that allows you to demonstrate a return on your security investment as well. So not only can it be used to justify securing security budget. So here's the assessment, these are the results, we need to focus our time and effort here, here's the justification. Police going to have some budget to address or to mitigate the risks identified here. Having already run a current state assessment, then subsequent current state assessment executions will also demonstrate a return on that investment. So we've invested X, and this is the result. So we should see an upward trend in your posture against the relevant key pillars, and indeed what we do within the dashboard is provide some visualization around the trend direction and so on and so forth. I've mentioned a number of times it enables C-level engagement and gives those people the relevant information at their fingertips to be able to see where they're exposed to from a risk perspective, and importantly it enables continuous engagement. So security absolutely is not something you should consider as doing once and then ticking a box and stepping back. It is absolutely something that needs to be continually reviewed, assessed. Things are changing, risks are changing, techniques are changing, technology changes hopefully at a faster pace. And it's all about being able to move dynamically with regards to the security landscape. So hopefully that's given you a really clear idea of what our security and privacy service is. We believe passionately in the service. We've delivered this a number of times, and it's delivering some significant value to our customers. If you have interest in this, please contact your account manager, or indeed you can email info@thirdspace.net. Thank you very much for listening.